It begins quietly, as most destinies do. The wind sweeps across the Anatolian plains, carrying the smell of campfires and dust. You can almost feel the cold night pressing against the canvas of a tent somewhere in Bithynia. Inside, a man dreams. His name is Osman, a leader of a small, wandering tribe called the Kayu. To most, they're just another nomadic people clinging to survival after the Mongols shattered their world. But to Osman, there's something different, something restless in his chest. In his dream, a tree rises from his heart. Its trunk stretches toward the heavens, its roots grip the earth, and its branches spread wide enough to shelter all humanity beneath them. When he wakes, the image refuses to fade. It feels less like a dream and more like a message. He doesn't tell everyone at first, but those who do hear it begin to whisper that Osman's destiny isn't ordinary. They say the dream means he's chosen, that he will build something that lasts beyond his lifetime. The world around him is splintered and weary. To the west, the Byzantine Empire limps on, its cities hollowed by centuries of decline. To the east, the Seljuks crumble under Mongol pressure. Between these fading powers lies a frontier, wild, chaotic, and perfect for men who dare to imagine more. Osman does not march with an army. He rides with faith, patience, and the loyalty of men who believe in him. His tribe begins to strike small Byzantine outposts, not as conquerors, but as survivors staking a claim in a decaying world. Word spreads of Osman's cunning. He strikes from nowhere and vanishes into the hills. He wins not by numbers, but by timing, by intuition. He starts to call his growing territory a beylik, a small principality built on courage and conviction. Around him, the whispers of prophecy turn into a quiet belief. People start arriving, farmers, warriors, dervishes, drawn to his vision. It's as if the dream itself is growing roots in the soil. Through alliances and faith, Osman begins to carve order out of chaos. His marriage to Malhun Hatun strengthens his claim and connects his bloodline to both noble and spiritual authority. Together, they raise a son named Orhan, a child born into the rhythm of war drums and prayer. No one knows it yet, but this child will carry his father's dream into the centuries. The nights remain cold, but the fires burn longer. Traders begin to pass through their lands, and new villages rise near Soyut, the small town that becomes Osman's seat. What was once a wandering tribe becomes a nucleus of power. The men who once fought to survive now fight for something greater, an idea, a legacy still too young to be named. As Osman grows older, his dream never leaves him. When his men ask what drives him, he speaks not of gold or glory, but of destiny. "We are not conquerors," he says. "We are the shadow of justice." In those words, the Ottoman identity begins to take form: faith, discipline, and endurance. Osman doesn't live to see the empire's vastness, but his dream lives on, etched into the heart of his people. By the time he passes, his followers already speak of their leader as if he were a legend. The tribes that once roamed aimlessly now march beneath a banner that carries his name. The seed of the Ottoman Empire has been planted, and as the dawn breaks over the Anatolian hills, you can almost feel the shift, the quiet hum of something awakening. The world has changed, though it doesn't know it yet. From the dream of one man, an empire begins to breathe. The dream didn't die with Osman. It settled into the bones of his people, into their songs, their faith, and their hunger for something greater. When Osman's son, Orhan, takes the reins, The world around him is already stirring. The Byzantine frontier, once a quiet patchwork of fading towns and small forts, is now trembling under the echo of hooves. Orhan grows up hearing the legend of his father's vision, the tree that shaded the world. But dreams mean nothing without ground to plant them in, and Orhan is determined to turn vision into empire. Where Osman was the dreamer, Orhan is the builder. He inherits a small but steady domain centered on Soğut, a modest capital buzzing with faith and fire. From here, he looks west, toward the crumbling Byzantine cities. The walls of Bursa rise before him, proud but weary. For years, it's been the jewel that eluded Osman. Orhan decides it will be his father's legacy fulfilled. The siege of Bursa is long and patient, more about endurance than fury. The Ottomans aren't a mighty empire yet, just a disciplined force that knows how to wait. While the Byzantines are trapped behind walls, Orhan's men cut their supply lines and quietly take the surrounding villages. Months turn into years. And then, one quiet morning in 1326, the city falls. When Orhan walks through Bursa's gates, he doesn't see a city conquered. He sees a future capital. He orders the markets repaired, the churches respected, and the people protected. This is the birth of the Ottoman way. Rule not just by the sword, but by structure. Stability becomes their most powerful weapon. As Bursa flourishes, the Ottoman banner begins to draw eyes from every corner of Anatolia. Displaced tribes, tired warriors, and even scholars start to drift in, seeking a place in this rising realm. The call of Gaza, holy struggle, rings louder now. But this isn't just about religion. It's about belonging to something destined to last. Orhan builds more than cities. He builds systems. He introduces coins bearing his name, a symbol of sovereignty. He organizes the military into a disciplined body, the roots of what will one day become the Janissaries. And when he sends his brother, Alaaddin Pasha, to govern alongside him, he proves that this empire won't rely on chaos. It will rely on vision and order. Meanwhile, across the sea, the Byzantines are unraveling. Civil wars tear them apart from within, leaving open wounds that Orhan's forces quietly step into. Fortresses once thought eternal now bow to the crescent. Each victory feels less like conquest and more like destiny unfolding, piece by piece. By the 1340s, the Ottomans have crossed the Dardanelles, the narrow strait that separates Asia from Europe. A storm wrecks a Byzantine fleet, and Orhan's son, Suleiman Pasha, takes advantage, securing a foothold in Gallipoli. For the first time, the Ottomans have stepped into Europe. The world has shifted again. Back home, the empire begins to hum with quiet prosperity. Markets grow louder, mosques rise beside ancient churches, and caravan routes reconnect lands that war had once broken. Even the air feels different, heavy with the scent of trade and ambition. Orhan grows older, watching the horizon as his father once did. But his gaze isn't filled with dreams. It's filled with direction. He knows the empire he's building will need more than warriors. It will need thinkers, jurists, and artists, people who can build a soul to match its body. When he dies in 1362, his people mourn, but the drums don't stop. His son, Murad I, takes the throne, younger, sharper, and hungrier. Where Osman dreamed and Orhan built, Murad will expand. The crescent has awakened. The river that once ran quietly through Soğut now feels like it's carrying the empire forward, toward a destiny written not just in faith, but in history itself. And as night falls again over Anatolia, the whispers of prophecy echo through the hills. The tree has begun to grow. By the time Mehmed II takes the throne, the Ottoman world has already stretched across continents. The empire breathes through the lands of Anatolia, whispers across the Balkans, and dreams of one last city. A city that has defied them for generations, Constantinople. It isn't just a place, it's a symbol, the heart of the old world, the crossroad between East and West, the city whose walls once held back centuries of ambition. The Byzantines, a shadow of what they once were, still cling to its crumbling marble. But Mehmed, young and unshaken, sees beyond the stone. He sees the future. He's only 21 when he takes command, but his confidence carries the weight of destiny. The world doubts him. His advisors whisper that the city is cursed. He smiles quietly and begins to prepare. Engineers are summoned from across the empire. Foundries roar with the birth of a new kind of weapon, massive cannons that can tear through walls once thought eternal. One of them, called Basilica, is so huge it takes 60 oxen to move it. In the spring of 1453, the Ottoman camps rise outside Constantinople like a sea of fire and steel. The city's golden domes glimmer faintly under the morning sun. Behind its walls, Emperor Constantine XV prays for a miracle. Mehmed does not wait for miracles. The siege begins. For weeks, the earth trembles with the rhythm of cannon fire. Stones fall, towers crumble, but the city holds. The Byzantines fight with desperate faith. They pour boiling oil from the walls, patch the breaches by night, and pray louder each dawn. The Ottomans answer with silence and discipline. Mehmed walks the front lines every day, calm, collected, as if each explosion brings him closer to prophecy. He orders a bold maneuver. His fleet, trapped by chains across the Golden Horn, is carried over land. Wooden tracks, greased with oil, turn hills into rivers. At dawn, the Byzantine defenders watch in horror as Ottoman ships slide across the hilltops and drop into the harbor behind their lines. The impossible has become real. Constantinople is surrounded on all sides. On May 29th, after 53 days of siege, the final assault begins. Drums thunder, trumpets blare, and the call to prayer echoes across the battlefield. The city's last defenders fight like ghosts of empires past. The gates of St. Romanus crack under the roar of Mehmed's cannons. The Ottomans surge through. The world tilts. When the fighting ends, the young sultan walks through the shattered gates. His soldiers cheer, but he doesn't raise his sword. Instead, he dismounts, bends down, and lifts a handful of dust. "The world is transient," he whispers, letting it slip through his fingers. Then he rides toward the Hagia Sophia, the great church that has watched 1,000 years pass. Inside, the silence feels older than time. Candles flicker. Dust dances in the air like ghosts of prayers. Mehmed looks up at the vast dome and declares it a mosque, not out of destruction, but transformation. The city will live on, not as Constantinople, but as Istanbul, the heart of his empire. The fall of Constantinople isn't just a victory. It's the dawn of a new world. Trade routes shift, kingdoms tremble, and the Ottomans rise as the bridge between continents. Scholars, artists, and mystics flood into the new capital, carrying ideas that will redefine an age. Mehmed, now called Fatih, the Conqueror, rebuilds the city brick by brick. He opens schools, restores aqueducts, and invites people of every faith to live within its walls. What began as a dream under a desert sky has become a civilization. And yet, for all his triumph, Mehmed remains haunted by time. He rides through his new capital at night, staring at the ruins of empires past, whispering to himself, "What rises will one day fall." Still, for now, the Ottoman star burns brighter than ever. The empire stretches from the Black Sea to the Balkans, from the deserts of Arabia to the gates of Europe. And as dawn touches the minarets of Istanbul for the first time, the sound of the adhan fills the air, soft, endless, eternal. The old world has ended. The Ottoman age has begun. By the time Suleiman rises to power, the Ottoman Empire isn't a dream anymore. It's a living giant, sprawling across 3 continents, breathing through thousands of cities, whispering in dozens of languages. Yet for all its might, Suleiman sees something more than conquest. He wants to build perfection. He becomes sultan in 1520, inheriting a throne made of both glory and pressure. His father, Selim the Grim, had expanded the empire's reach deep into the Arab world, seizing Mecca, Medina, and Cairo. But Suleiman isn't content to simply inherit a legacy. He wants to refine it, to turn the Ottoman Empire from a vast dominion into a masterpiece. He's young, tall, calm, and dangerous in his vision. To his soldiers, he's a warrior. To his poets, a philosopher. To his people, Kanuni, the lawgiver. His rule becomes the empire's heartbeat, a balance between faith and intellect, steel and silk. In the early years, his armies move like storms. Belgrade falls first, opening the gates to Europe. Then Rhodes, the island fortress of the Crusaders, succumbs after a grueling siege. The world begins to tremble when he turns his gaze toward the heart of Christendom, Hungary. At Mohacs in 1526, the Ottoman army meets the Hungarian forces. The battle is swift, almost unreal. Within 2 hours, the Hungarian kingdom collapses. The young king Louis II drowns in retreat, and the Ottoman banner rises over the fields. Europe gasps. The crescent has reached the gates of Vienna. Suleiman leads the siege in 1529, his army stretching across the horizon. But rain, mud, and the sheer stubbornness of Vienna halt the advance. He retreats, not defeated, but patient. The message is clear. The Ottomans can reach anywhere. Back in Istanbul, Suleiman turns from war to art. He invites architects, poets, and scholars to fill his court. The empire becomes a world of marble, music, and mathematics. The most brilliant of them all is Mimar Sinan, a former stonemason who rises to become the empire's chief architect. Under his hands, mosques become symphonies in stone. The Suleymaniye Mosque, rising over Istanbul, becomes more than a monument. It's Suleiman's soul carved into the skyline. Balanced, graceful, and immense, it declares to the world that faith and reason can live under one dome. Yet the empire isn't just grandeur. Beneath the beauty lies tension. The court buzzes with intrigue, and power weaves its dangerous threads. At the heart of it all is Hurrem Sultan, known in the West as Roxolana. Once a slave, now the Sultan's beloved wife. Her influence changes everything. For the first time, the walls of the harem echo with politics. Her sons vie for succession. Her allies gain favor, and the empire's future begins to twist in unseen ways. Suleiman, torn between love and duty, tries to balance empire and heart. He writes poetry under the pen name Muhibi, his verses filled with longing and faith. The conqueror becomes the philosopher king, a ruler who sees that empires can fall not from swords, but from the weight of their own desires. His later years are quieter, heavy with reflection. He leads one final campaign against Hungary, old but unyielding. In 1566, during the siege of Sigetvar, he dies in his tent, his passing kept secret until victory is won. When the news spreads, the empire mourns as if the sun itself has set. Suleiman's reign marks the empire's zenith, the moment when it glows brightest before time begins its slow dimming. Law, art, and power reach perfect balance, if only for a generation. And as the call to prayer rises from Istanbul's hills, echoing over the Bosporus, it feels like the voice of a civilization at its most alive, and perhaps, unknowingly, at its most fragile. The golden age of the Ottomans has burned brilliantly, but even the brightest flame casts the longest shadow. The empire, now vast and golden under Suleiman's reign, breathes with rhythm, not of war, but of life. Cities glitter like jewels across the map. Istanbul, Cairo, Damascus, Baghdad, Edirne. Each hums with markets, prayer calls, and the murmur of thousands of stories unfolding at once. This is what the world sees when it imagines the height of the Ottomans, a civilization wrapped in silk and intellect, where every street corner feels like a crossroad between continents. Mornings in Istanbul begin with sound. The call to prayer rolls across the Bosporus, echoing from minarets that touch the dawn. Merchants open their stalls in the Grand Bazaar, where the smell of spice, leather, and warm bread fill the air. Traders from Venice, Persia, and India haggle in a dozen tongues, their voices blending into a single pulse of commerce. Gold changes hands, stories are swapped, and the empire grows richer, not just in wealth, but in experience. The coffee houses rise next, smoky and alive with argument. Poets recite verses of love and conquest, philosophers debate faith and reason, and travelers share tales from lands so far they sound mythical. It's said you can learn more in an Ottoman cafe than in 100 books, and perhaps it's true. Ideas pass like cups of dark coffee, bitter, strong, unforgettable. Beyond the noise, the empire's true power flows quietly through its scholars. The madrasas, those marble schools attached to mosques, produce thinkers who can navigate the stars, the law, and the soul with equal precision. Astronomy flourishes. Medicine advances. Historians begin to record the empire not just as a state, but as a vision of divine order on earth. Everywhere, art blooms. Calligraphers paint words so graceful they seem to float. Miniaturists capture whole worlds inside the curve of a brushstroke. In music, the ney flute and oud strings fill palace halls with songs that sound like longing itself. The empire has learned that beauty can be power, a quiet form of conquest that no army can resist. But beneath the elegance lies something darker, the soft rustle of intrigue. The Topkapi Palace, gleaming above the Bosporus, hides secrets in its shadowed corridors. The harem, often misunderstood, isn't just a place of silk and jewels. It's a political engine where alliances are woven and futures decided behind latticed windows. Ambition whispers here as gently as prayer. The Janissaries, once an elite corps of loyal soldiers, begin to see their own strength. They are slaves in name, but power in practice, men taken as boys, trained from childhood to serve the Sultan. Yet power changes everyone. As their influence grows, so does their will to shape the empire's destiny. For now, they remain loyal. But loyalty, like silk, frays with time. Outside the palace walls, life moves at a slower rhythm. Farmers till the Anatolian soil. Caravan routes snake through deserts and mountains, carrying textiles, spices, and stories. In the villages, children learn to recite poetry before they can read, and elders tell tales of the prophet, of Suleiman, of Osman's dream. The tree still growing, its branches stretching farther each generation. In the evenings, the empire glows. Lanterns flicker in narrow alleys, laughter spills from courtyards, and the sound of prayer mingles with the hum of life. A traveler standing at the edge of the Bosporus might think he's witnessing paradise made real. But no paradise lasts forever. Beneath the silks and scholars, the first cracks begin to show. The bureaucracy swells. Greed creeps into the corners of the system, and the vastness that once gave the Ottomans strength begins to strain its seams. The empire still shines, bright enough to blind anyone who looks too closely, but shadows are gathering quietly beneath its golden dome. The night is calm, the city sleeps, and the Bosporus breathes under a sky of stars. Yet somewhere in that darkness, history is shifting again. The dream that once felt eternal is beginning to dream of its own ending. Faith is the empire's heartbeat. It's in the way the call to prayer rises from every city, echoing from 1,000 minarets. It's in the rhythm of life itself. Work and rest, dawn and dusk, power and humility. To live in the Ottoman world is to live inside an act of devotion. Islam isn't just a religion here. It's a framework that binds the empire together. The Sultan is not only a ruler, but also the Caliph, the guardian of faith for millions. His authority stretches beyond borders, from the deserts of Arabia to the forests of the Balkans, from Cairo's mosques to Baghdad's ruins. Wherever the crescent flies, the Sultan's word carries the weight of both law and prayer. The empire's strength lies in its balance. Faith rules, but tolerance breathes. In Istanbul, churches and synagogues stand beside mosques. Greek priests, Armenian merchants, and Jewish scholars all move through the same streets, each living under the empire's millet system, a delicate structure that allows different communities to govern their own religious affairs. It's not equality in the modern sense, but in a world shaped by conquest, it's remarkable coexistence. Judges known as qadis travel from city to city, carrying the law of the Sharia in their books and justice in their demeanor. They resolve disputes in markets, in mosques, sometimes under the shade of trees. Law, for the Ottomans, is sacred. It's a reflection of divine order on earth, and to break it is to disturb the harmony that holds the empire together. Friday prayers at the great mosques are moments of awe. The faithful fill courtyards like waves, standing shoulder to shoulder, faces turned toward Mecca. The imam's voice rises, carrying verses that seem to make the very stones tremble. And when the prayer ends, the crowd disperses quietly. Merchants return to their stalls, scholars to their books, soldiers to their posts. Faith doesn't interrupt life here. It weaves through it, stitching every action to a higher purpose. Mysticism, too, finds its home in the empire. The Sufi orders, Mevlevis, Bektashis, Helvetis, move through cities like gentle rivers, bringing songs, poetry, and a different kind of worship. Their gatherings are filled with whirling dancers, spinning in devotion, losing themselves in the rhythm of divine love. To the Sufis, God isn't distant. He's in every breath, every heartbeat, every act of compassion. Their music softens hearts where sermons fail. This spiritual richness gives the empire its soul, but it also plants the seeds of tension. Scholars argue over doctrine. Mystics are sometimes praised, sometimes condemned. The line between piety and heresy shifts with every century. Yet somehow, the Ottoman world holds together. Faith as its spine, diversity as its breath. The empire's architecture mirrors its faith. The mosques aren't just places of worship, they're communities. Each one is surrounded by schools, kitchens, hospitals, and fountains. To build a mosque is to build a city's heart. Water flows freely, food is shared with the poor, and education becomes a form of devotion. At the center of it all stands the Sultan, the shadow of God on earth, as the poets say. His responsibility isn't only to command armies or write laws, it's to ensure justice. The ideal ruler is one who rules himself first. That's the lesson every Ottoman child learns from the tales of Suleiman and his predecessors. That power without faith is hollow. As the empire stretches further and the centuries pass, this balance of faith and rule becomes harder to maintain. The bureaucracy grows thicker, the scholars more rigid, and the purity of intention harder to find. But still, each dawn, the call to prayer rises again. The empire, with all its flaws and glories, answers that call like a living being, old, wise, and bound to its creator. And as the muezzin's voice fades into the horizon, the world beyond the empire begins to change. New empires rise in the west. New ideas whisper across Europe. The Ottomans pray, build, and believe. But change is patient. It waits at the edge of faith, ready to test the strength of belief itself. The marble of empire does not shatter all at once. It cracks slowly, quietly, almost politely. The Ottoman Empire, once unstoppable, begins to change in ways even its rulers can't fully see. The 17th century arrives with a calm of familiarity, but beneath that calm, the rhythm is off. The old harmony, faith, discipline, expansion, starts to slip into discord. The armies that once galloped across continents now march slower, burdened not by enemies, but by age. The Janissaries, once the empire's pride, begin to forget their purpose. They were created to serve the Sultan with pure loyalty, soldiers raised from childhood to embody discipline and devotion. But centuries of privilege have softened them. They own shops, marry, and meddle in politics. When orders come from the palace, they sometimes answer not with obedience, but with negotiation. The sword that once protected the throne now weighs heavily against it. In the palaces, the harem grows quieter, but no less powerful. The age of the Sultanate of women, when queens and mothers guided policy behind silk curtains, leaves its mark. Some bring wisdom, others chaos. The line between influence and intrigue blurs. Succession becomes a dangerous game, with brothers imprisoned or blinded to secure the throne. It is a dark evolution of the dream that Osman once saw. The branches still wide, but the roots tangled. Economically, the empire begins to bleed. Trade, once its lifeline, shifts toward the seas. European ships sail around Africa, bringing goods from India and China directly to their ports, bypassing Ottoman lands. Caravans still crawl across the deserts, but the gold grows thinner. Inflation bites, corruption creeps, taxes rise, and in villages from Anatolia to the Balkans, the farmers who once fed the empire begin to starve beneath its weight. In the capital, the grandeur remains. Mosques still rise, fountains still flow, but the marble gleam hides rot beneath. Bureaucrats multiply like vines, feeding off the empire's size. Bribes replace merit. Paper replaces purpose. The Sultan's decrees echo through halls where no one truly listens anymore. Wars, once glorious, now feel heavy. The Ottomans fight the Safavids in Persia, the Habsburgs in Europe, the Venetians on the seas. Victories come and go, but each one costs more than the last. In 1683, the empire makes one last audacious push. A grand army marches to the gates of Vienna, just as Suleiman once did. For a moment, the dream of conquest stirs again. But this time, it ends differently. The siege collapses. The allied forces of Europe counterattack, and the Ottomans are driven back. The empire loses not just land, but confidence. The myth of invincibility is gone. From that moment on, Europe no longer fears the Ottoman advance. It studies the Ottoman decline. Inside the empire, people begin to feel the shift. Scholars argue whether God is testing them or abandoning them. Poets write of lost glory, of distant days when justice and strength move together. Sultans come and go, some pious, some indulgent, all trapped in the machinery of a system too big to steer. And yet, life continues. The bazaars are still full. The call to prayer still rises. The ships still sail across the Bosporus. To an ordinary citizen, the empire seems eternal. But those who listen closely, the thinkers, the soldiers, the old, hear a faint creaking sound beneath the splendor. The cracks in the marble widen. Slowly, invisibly, the empire begins to tilt toward a new age, an age of reform, rebellion, and reckoning. In the distance, Europe hums with invention and revolution. Cannons grow stronger, ships faster, and ideas freer. The Ottomans, still proud, look outward and realize something chilling. The world has changed, and they have not. The tree that Osman saw still stands, but its leaves are thinning. And though the roots are deep, even the oldest trees can feel the weight of time. By the dawn of the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire is no longer feared. It is pitied. The world still bows to its history, still marvels at its cities. But behind the facades of mosques and palaces, the empire is gasping for breath. The European diplomats have a cruel nickname for it, the sick man of Europe. And in many ways, they're right. The empire that once bridged worlds now finds itself surrounded by them. Russia presses from the north, hungry for the Black Sea. Britain and France circle the Mediterranean, carving colonies out of the very trade routes the Ottomans once commanded. The world has shifted to steam, steel, and science, and the empire is still moving on the rhythm of horses and tradition. Inside, reformers and conservatives pull at each other like opposing tides. The sultans see that something must change, but every change threatens to unravel centuries of custom. When Sultan Selim III rises to power in 1789, he dares to modernize. He reforms the army, sending ambassadors to Europe to study science and tactics. He dreams of an empire reborn through discipline. But the Janissaries, once protectors, now a corrupt brotherhood, refuse to be remade. They revolt, drag him from his throne, and murder him in his palace. The empire seems cursed to fight itself. Each attempt at renewal births rebellion. The provinces, Egypt, Greece, Serbia, begin to sense their own strength. They rise, claiming independence and blood. The once unbreakable unity of the Ottoman world starts to splinter into nations. Then comes Mehmed II, a ruler born into chaos but tempered by fire. He knows reform cannot be begged for. It must be seized. In 1826, he gathers the Janissaries in Istanbul under the pretense of a celebration. When they refuse his new military order, his cannons open fire. The square fills with smoke and screams. By nightfall, the Janissary Corps, the empire's oldest institution, is gone. Mahmud calls it the auspicious incident. History calls it the day the old empire died and the new one began. From the ashes of tradition rises the Tanzimat, the reorganization. Decrees sweep across the empire, promising equality before the law, new schools, new taxes, new armies. Bureaucrats draft constitutions. Young men learn French and study in European academies. Railways cut through deserts, that had never known iron. For a moment, it seems to work. The empire, weary but proud, begins to stir again. But modernization comes with a price. The reforms demand money, and money means debt. European banks lend eagerly, binding the Ottomans with golden chains. The empire begins to look like a puppet in the hands of its creditors. Foreign advisors crowd the ministries. The once mighty treasury becomes a ledger of IOUs. At the same time, nationalism burns brighter across its provinces. The Balkans erupt in rebellion after rebellion. Serbia, Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, each one chipping away at the old imperial dream. The world watches as 1,000 years of borders dissolve into smoke. Yet amid the chaos, hope flickers. In 1856, after the Crimean War, the Ottomans stand alongside Britain and France as allies against Russia. The victory restores a little pride, but it also reveals the truth. The empire survives now, not through fear, but through the mercy of others. Istanbul remains beautiful. Steamships fill the Bosporus. The skyline of domes and minarets glows at sunset. Poets still write, scholars still teach, and the call to prayer still echoes over the city. But the people can feel it. The empire's heartbeat is slowing. In the palace, the sultans retreat behind marble walls, caught between nostalgia and necessity. Abdülmecid, elegant and idealistic, opens schools and embraces reform. His successor, Abdulaziz, builds a navy so vast it nearly bankrupts the empire. When debts spiral, he's deposed and found dead, officially suicide, unofficially a warning. Then comes Abdülhamid II, cautious and calculating. He pulls the empire back into the shadows, ruling with surveillance and fear, building railways while silencing dissent. Under his reign, the empire becomes a contradiction, modern yet paranoid, pious yet oppressive, reforming while retreating. By the century's end, Europe has carved the world into colonies. Machines hum, telegraphs sing, and the Ottomans, still proud, still ornate, still alive, stand like an aging monarch watching a generation of young kings rise around him. The sick man of Europe still breathes, but each breath feels heavier. The empire that once shaped the world now fights to remember its own name. And yet, history isn't done with it. From within the sickness, a new pulse begins to form. Young officers whisper of revolution. Students gather in secret. The dream of reform begins to turn into something dangerous, something alive. The night is long, but dawn is stirring again. And when it comes, it will not. Be gentle. The 20th century arrives like a storm. The Ottoman Empire, tired but unbowed, stands at the crossroads of time. Too modern to be ancient, too ancient to be modern. It has survived invasions, revolts, and centuries of change. But now, the storm gathering over Europe will test it like never before. The Balkan Wars of the early 1910s strike first, cutting deep into the empire's body. Once proud lands, Macedonia, Albania, Bosnia, slip away like sand through fingers. Soldiers return home broken, villages burn, and the empire's borders shrink to their smallest shape in centuries. The old dream of dominion is gone. Survival becomes the only goal. Then, in 1914, the Great War erupts, a conflict so vast that no empire can remain untouched. The Ottomans, under the leadership of the Young Turks, join the Central Powers alongside Germany and Austria-Hungary. It's a gamble made out of desperation and pride, a belief that war might restore what diplomacy has taken. The empire mobilizes. Millions of men march to battlefields stretching from the Caucasus to Mesopotamia, from Gallipoli to Palestine. In the deserts, camels march beside tanks. In the mountains, soldiers freeze before they ever see an enemy. At Gallipoli, the world holds its breath. British, Australian, and New Zealand troops land on the shores, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they meet the fierce defense of Mustafa Kemal, a young Ottoman officer who refuses to retreat. "I am not ordering you to attack," he tells his men. "I am ordering you to die." They obey. The sea turns red, and the Allies are forced to withdraw. Gallipoli becomes legend, a brief flash of Ottoman defiance in a war that is otherwise a slow disintegration. But elsewhere, tragedy unfolds. In the chaos of war, paranoia and fear lead to dark decisions. The Armenian genocide, one of history's deepest wounds, scars the empire forever. Communities that had lived side by side for centuries vanish in marches and massacres. The empire's soul fractures. By 1918, the dream is over. The war ends with the Ottomans defeated, their allies broken, their land carved up by victors. British troops march through Jerusalem, French forces occupy Syria, and Greece lands in Smyrna. Even Istanbul falls under foreign control. The empire that once ruled 3 continents is now a shadow under foreign flags. And yet, amid the ruin, something new begins to stir. Out of defeat rises a movement, small at first, but burning with conviction. Mustafa Kemal, now called Ataturk, refuses to accept surrender. He rallies soldiers, villagers, students, anyone who still believes in independence, and marches into history once more. From Ankara, far from the occupied coasts, he begins to rebuild a nation from the bones of an empire. The Turkish War of Independence ignites. It's not fought for empire, but for survival, for identity. Against all odds, the movement pushes back the foreign armies. By 1923, the last invader withdraws, and the world watches in disbelief as the Ottoman Empire, 6 centuries old, draws its final breath. On October 29, 1923, Ataturk declares the birth of the Republic of Turkey. The Sultanate is abolished. The Caliphate soon follows. The palaces of the sultans stand silent, their domes still gleaming under the sun, but their halls empty of power. The empire that began as a dream beneath the stars ends as a nation reborn in the fire of modernity. The crescent doesn't vanish, it transforms. Ataturk turns east and west at once, reforming language, law, education, and dress. He builds a secular state from the ruins of faith and empire. To some, it feels like betrayal. To others, salvation. But no one can deny the magnitude of it. A people torn from history, stitching themselves anew. In the silence, after centuries of conquest and collapse, the Ottomans become memory. Their cities remain, their culture endures, their legacy ripples through every corner of the modern world. The empire is gone, but the idea of it, the blending of worlds, the meeting of East and West, survives. And as dawn rises over Istanbul, the muezzin's call still drifts across the Bosporus, soft and eternal. The sound has changed languages, empires, and eras, but it has never stopped. The dream that began with Osman's vision has found its ending and its continuation in the hearts of those who still listen. The empire has fallen asleep, but history never truly does. Empires fade, but they never disappear completely. Their bones become cities. Their language lingers in the air. The Ottoman Empire, though gone for a century, still breathes quietly through modern life. In the streets of Istanbul, in the rhythm of prayer, in the taste of tea, and the curve of a dome against the sky. Walk through Istanbul today, and you're walking through time layered upon itself. Streetcars rattle past mosques built by sultans who lived half a millennium ago. Beneath your feet, Byzantine stones support Ottoman arches. Above, glass towers scrape the clouds in a city that has never stopped reinventing itself. You can buy a coffee where soldiers once planned sieges, or hear the same lullabies sung in a dozen languages across the Bosporus. The empire is gone, but its memory is stitched into every brick. In the heart of this new nation stands Ataturk's legacy: secularism, modernization, a fierce belief in progress. His Turkey is meant to look forward, not back. The fez is gone, replaced by suits. The Arabic script replaced with Latin letters. The caliphate, the spiritual crown that once linked millions of Muslims, is abolished. And yet, for all the change, echoes of the Ottoman rhythm persist. The balance between East and West, tradition and modernity, faith and reason, it's still the melody Turkey dances to. Across the former empire, the echoes take different forms. In the Balkans, old Ottoman bridges still cross silent rivers, their stones weathered but unbroken. In the Middle East, Ottoman forts and railways dot the deserts, reminders of a time when the empire's reach stretched like the wind. Even in cuisine, the spices, the sweets, the coffee, the memory of centuries of mingling lives on. Every cup poured, every market stall, every melody hummed under the sun feels like an inheritance. But the echo isn't just nostalgia, it's a question. What does it mean to outlive your own empire? Modern Turkey wrestles with that question daily. How to honor the past without being consumed by it. The Ottomans were both conquerors and builders, scholars and soldiers, believers and dreamers. Their story is a mirror of human ambition. Magnificent, flawed, enduring. Today, the empire's legacy is studied in classrooms, dramatized in television series, debated in parliament, and sung about in cafes. To some, it's a symbol of unity, of lost grandeur. To others, it's a cautionary tale about the price of power. Both are true, because the Ottoman story was never just about borders or battles. It was about people: Armenians, Arabs, Greeks, Jews, Turks, Kurds, Bosnians, Albanians, millions of lives woven into one vast tapestry. The empire's real legacy isn't its conquests, but the connections it forged between worlds that might otherwise have remained strangers. And perhaps that's the most lasting echo. The idea that civilization isn't a single story, but a conversation across centuries. The Ottomans, for all their contradictions, kept that conversation alive. They built bridges, literal and spiritual, between cultures that still define the world today. As the sun sets over the Bosporus, the city glows in gold and shadow. The call to prayer rises once more, not as a memory, but as a living sound. The same voice that once echoed through the courts of Suleiman, through the alleys of Damascus, through the deserts of Arabia. The empire is gone, yet it still hums beneath the heartbeat of the modern world. The dream that began in a tent under the stars has come full circle. The branches of Osman's tree stretch invisibly now, not through lands, but through history itself. Nations have replaced the empire, but its roots still hold the soil of half the world. Empires fall asleep. People move on. But the story remains, whispering through time, reminding us that power fades, beauty endures, and history never truly says goodbye.